Please welcome to the stage Benedict Cumberbatch and Ann Lunas, Chief Marketing Officer at Adobe.
Morning.
Hello. Woohoo! All right, everybody take all your photos now. One mass photo. Come on. There they go.
I'll bomb it for you.
Oh, look at them. Wow.
Morning, phones.
We should take a photo of all the photos. That's fantastic. We were just talking about how you go to concerts now and all you see is people taking photos.
Yeah. And all you can see is the photo of the people
and you
you
wonder if anyone's really enjoying the live experience.
This is very true. And I'm old enough to remember this sort of evolving in the sort of short space that I've kind of expanded in terms of fame or exposure. And it's kind of, it's bizarre. It's shifted from the point where, you know, people, you come out and say hello and people would wave. And now it's just literally sort of a phone salute. And they're like, hello, Ben, how are you? You know,
so
it's weird.
First of all, thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
Everybody's really excited about having you. Congratulations on your Oscar nomination for The Imitation Game. Let's give it up.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what's life been like since the Oscars?
Pretty normal. I mean, I've got, gone back to work. I'm nesting for my family, my imminent family, and just living a London life, basically. Yeah, of course, the moment is extraordinary, and I think depending on where you're at in your career, it can give you a great kind of surge forward. But I've got a production company. I've got things that are already sort of lined up for myself and for that company. So work-wise, it's been wonderful to be acknowledged in that way, but it doesn't feel that it's shifted the whole kind of axis or perspective of my world, to be honest. That's not to say it wasn't a wonderful moment, and the best moment was being nominated and ringing my parents, who are both actors, and saying your only son has been nominated for an Oscar. That was amazing, unforgettable.
So about a month ago, we had a conference just like this in the United States, and we had the pleasure of having Michael Keaton as our guest, and I interviewed him, and I asked him whether he thought he should have won. And he immediately said, yes.
Yeah,
and
he could have won.
So maybe I'll ask you, do you think you should have won?
No.
Why not?
Because it's not
about winning. Do you think
winning.
Michael Keaton should have won?
Yeah.
I'll tell him.
And Eddie,
So why don't
Steve Crown.
Why don't you think you should have won?
Because, you can't go into it thinking, I'm sure Michael was having some fun with it, you know what I mean? And that's what you have to do. The whole thing is a celebration. But if you take it to a competitive level down the way, when I heard the feedback of Eddie's performance in Toronto, I thought, well, he's going to get the Oscar. I knew then, and that was months before. And stupidly, I didn't bet on it. Because part of me was thinking, that's a really odd thing to do, to bet on that sort of thing. But, he's a dear friend of mine, and that's an extraordinary piece of work, and a unique character to play, as I know very well, having played a smaller screen version and a smaller period of time version of Stephen's story on the BBC a few years ago. So weirdly connected through both the actor and the subject to that whole thing, which was odd to begin with, but then actually rather wonderful, because it meant I got to see a lot of them and celebrate with them. And you can't feel hard done by when you're doing the kind of work that I've been asked to do, and it gets the recognition that it's been getting. There's no fallback. There's no need to complain. I'm very, very, very sincerely content.
And I'm sure you'll be nominated again, and you'll probably win the next time.
We'll see. But yeah. And then I'll get really competitive.
And then you'll get.
And then it's
So, Time Magazine, they named you one of the top 100 most influential people of the year, along
I haven't done
with...
much with that yet. I feel like I should, I don't know, maybe just take you guys out into London and have a revolution. And
Beyonce, Barack Obama, and the Pope.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, not all of them, maybe, but certainly three in that list. I think it's highly ridiculous. But, I mean... He's supposed to be, God's anointed spiritual guide on earth for the Catholic religion. You've got the leader of the free world up there with me. I mean, it's bizarre.
So you're so popular. I wanted to show a photo. You're so popular that people are actually making chocolate idols of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm edible.
And that woman took a bite out of your nose, too.
There you go.
So how does this feel to be, like, so famous? It's freaky.
It feels like I'm just...
It's life-size. It's 100% Belgian chocolate.
It feels like a health hazard looking at that. That's how it feels. You don't want to be eating all of me at once. That's crazy. Gosh, the
how does it feel to be so famous?
Look, I don't know. I mean, I'd say that it's the thing that's odd about it, I think, is when you walk into, this is, funnily enough,
well, at least they put the phones
grand
down.
volume. This is a conversation. This is normal. This is what you want to have with people that you meet in life at certain points. You know, you want to be able to talk honestly and openly about what you feel and what you're doing and who you are and who they are. That's the only weird thing, is it's a very one-way process. But as far as this end of what I receive, being well-known or famous, whatever you want to call it, this is sort of normal. What's abnormal, what's always difficult, and I'm still adjusting to, is the idea of being recognized before knowing anything about the person recognizing me, adjusting to being the observed rather than the observer, being the product rather than the buyer, being the viewed rather than the viewer. And that's still ongoing. You know, I want to live as much of a normal life, whatever that means, in my exhausted circumstances, as I can, as an audience, as a member of my community, my society, whatever level that is, family, bigger, local, neighborhoods, you know, town, country, nationality, you know, however wide that bracket gets. It's that sort of Jungian thing, isn't it? The sort of destructive thing where you're very much defining yourself by your differences, and then the love, the other half of the Jungian sort of polarities, where it's about being inclusive, being understanding, empathetic, and belonging. And, you know, my work does a lot of that. There's a huge amount of communication and belonging in that, which, if I could just stand beside my work, behind it, wherever, just not, you know, not having to talk about it more than just do it, I'd be very happy. But we don't live in that world. So there's this sort of mass exposure of communication. Things can go incredibly wrong, can go incredibly right, can just be fun, can be hard work, can be overexposed, can be underdeveloped, whatever it is. You know, there are varying levels of that which are interesting. Interesting to engage in that, but slightly embarrassing when it gets to the point of being on the front cover of Time and people going, you know, you're one of the most influential people in the world. You think, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to harness that. Maybe the good people at this conference can tell me how to use that. I mean, I'm careful of my brand, whatever that is, in terms of being an artist. I make very specific choices about selfish often, about what I want to do next to surprise myself as well as my audience, and what I think would be good to do next or show that I could do next. But it's not really about, because of what I've achieved, it's not about getting a bigger market, it's not about getting a bigger audience, it's about doing things with that audience that are interesting, that are unexpected. You know, getting out of the typecasting of being a kind of officer class hero, or being someone who only does seemingly difficult intellectual brainiacs. I
was going to ask you about that, actually.
And, you know, moving, so that's part of it. But come back to your question, you know, fame, that's the oddest thing. Within work, within the promotion of the work, sometimes it gets very weird. Within the work, it's fine. As in, I don't mind having an audience that's going to judge me, love me, hate me, feel indifferent, whatever. I don't then really always relish the idea of being accessible beyond your work. And it's a really nuanced thing to say that, because you hear actors complaining about it, you think, oh, come on. You've got this life, you've got this work space, which is all about needing an audience. And now you're saying no, but I don't know, think of it in terms of other professions, like doctors, like people who give lectures you know, to these fine people in these circumstances. They don't want you tweeting what you're doing in your kitchen. You know, they don't want you to be, you know, gossiping about whether or not you were holding hands with your girlfriend or whatever, or who your girlfriend or wife is. And, you know, private and public, there is a sort of separation, which sort of could lead us neatly into talking about social media a bit as well. But,
yeah,
you know,
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, that's the thing. I don't do it.
Well,
I talk about it. I could talk about it. But
we'll talk about it a little later.
That was a long answer, sorry. It's early in the morning. No. I hope you've all had coffee.
So you don't love it, and that's perfectly fine. Do you think you're overexposed?
I don't love what people think is enjoyable about...
Yeah.
There's a lot to enjoy about fame, but I think it's common sense to most people. I'm just saying what people would probably feel if they were in my position.
Yeah.
And what lots of other people who are in my position feel. You know, it's pretty obvious stuff, but... and it's, look, that's what, in fact, when you get to my level of whatever, that's what you're paid for. It's not the job. The job is still something, don't tell any producers this, but I'm very happy to do for free. I get such a kick out of it, you know. I genuinely love my job. Don't tell anyone. Tweet.
Okay, so let's talk about the job. So let's talk about the imitation game.
Yeah.
So you play Alan Turing. He's a brilliant computer scientist, hero. And I went to see the film with my husband, who happens to be a computer historian.
Great,
And
good audience. Yeah.
And at the end of the film, I said, you know, I never heard of Alan Turing. And he looked at me and he was
He must have been
aghast. He
shocked.
said, are you crazy? Alan Turing is like God. So before you did the film, had you heard of Alan Turing? If not, like, what compelled you to play this character?
Well, I'd heard of him, but like you, I mean, not in terms of your husband. I didn't know him as a god, and I think that was sadly, to the world, sort of, you know, the majority of people knew a bit about him, but not the whole story. And it's interesting why that's the case is, you know, subject for, God knows, theses and loads of interesting papers to come, I'm sure, partly maybe to do with the Official Secrets Act, partly to do with what happened to him in the 50s, his persecution and prosecution, and obviously, you know, partly to do with the man himself. He wasn't into self-promotion, and he wasn't somebody who ever stood in front of his work, ironically considering what I've just been talking about, but, you know, very specifically, he would move on with ideas, with what he wanted to accomplish, and he would, I'm thinking specifically about on computable numbers. I mean, if he'd really pursued that in his work with algorithms, he would have been at the sort of standing, I think, of a Nobel Prize winner. I mean, he would have had a massive godlike power in his field. And while he was respected during his time and very much honored and respected now in the fields of technology and Silicon Valley, he's rightly held up as being the, you know, the father of all computer science. Or at least of evolving the ideas, if you're very cynical about him, that...
He was a hacker.
Yeah. But I'm trying to remember her name, Byron's daughter, has completely gone from my brain, and Charles Babbage, I think his name was, who began computing around the time of the Industrial Revolution with patterning on cards for programming hardware, the looms, these incredible machines churning out, first time these incredible patterns based on software being fed into hardware and coming out programming a computer, which resulted in data as a stunning carpet or tapestry. And so he advanced that with the idea of computable numbers. This idea of a universal machine was the real, as far as I can understand it, the real evolution. I feel really nervous now talking to all of you about this. This is, yeah.
It's
like
okay.
telling the
Nobody
Pope how
here
to do his
knows
job.
anything about data.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you're all, yeah, exactly. And yeah, I found, you know, from that, God, I can't remember where I was. That's really made me very self-conscious, saying that I'm self-conscious.
Don't worry about it.
Well, I was talking about Alan Turing.
Yeah,
I was talking about, did I know about him? That was
yeah,
the
did you
question.
know about him?
Christ. So, yeah, obviously not.
You want to talk about being famous again?
No. No, definitely done that. No, I knew a little bit about him from being a student at Manchester. So I'd seen that bench, the famous bench where there's a commemorative statue to him.
I mean, is he more famous in England?
I didn't know that he was a gay icon as much as he is. Again, no, well, more famous in England than in the world in general?
Than he is in the U.S.
You'd have to
Clearly
ask
not.
Time magazine that
Yeah.
question. I think they got their finger on the pulse of who matters in the world.
I don't think he ever made it to the top 100 list.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably not, because I think, you know, as I was saying, partly his personality. But, you know, so you have a very specialist interest group who knew about him in the world of computing. You have a very specialist interest group, well, not specialist, but as far as being a gay icon, he was a man who quietly admitted his nature in a time of intolerance and didn't sort of loudly martyr himself, which is, again, another reason why, as an actor, I was very happy to be loud about his story, not playing him, hopefully, but in talking about him. Because he never would have done this. He would have found it all utterly not repugnant, not necessarily in a kind of judgmental way. He just would have found it really difficult apart from anything else. I mean, his stammer was really marked, much more so than we could afford to make it in the film, but it's there. And it was a massive component as to who he was and how he and why he did what he did. If you're a young child in a near Victorian age and you can't speak fluently, and you can't make the normal social bonds. So how do you go about justifying your existence and finding an identity? I think it makes complete sense that you turn inwards and become this sort of rather extraordinary, exceptional, and different entity, thinker, person, soul, brain. But it doesn't mean that he was necessarily on the spectrum necessarily. There are correlatives with certain behavioral patterns of autism, I suppose, in particular. But it sort of simplifies, I think, the kind of context of his nurture, which was very, very yeah, very much the science and nature behind his nature.
So
where was I with that? Yeah, so I knew little bits about him, but yeah, one of the driving passions was to bring the injustice of what happened to him to light, the incredible war he had, which was responsible for potentially saving millions of lives by bringing an early cessation to the violence by cracking the German Enigma code, and being this father, this godfather, this evolutionary stepping stone in computer science.
So you mentioned earlier you tend to play these kind of big brains. Stephen Hawking, Turing, Sherlock. I'll ask you about Sherlock in a minute. So you inject kind of some glamour, some intrigue. So is there a pattern? You said there's not a pattern, but do you pick these
with
characters
those roles, they're just the
intentionally?
sort of, well, they're the tipping points, aren't they? They're the most sort of extreme and interesting kind of on the paper and in the flesh. It's like, how would this work in the real world? What situations do you put these people in? Which I think the writers have a lot of fun with our version of Sherlock. And it's a great thing to explore. You have more breadth and colour and dynamic, I suppose. And I think, audiences are increasingly being treated as the intelligent human beings they are, and not being patronized with oversimplification and just linear storylines and dull characters. That you're allowed to now express the kind of fizz and pop of great ideas and fast-speaking, fast-moving brains and intellects, and that's really exciting. And my job, I guess, as an actor, as it is always, is to be a storyteller. So I've got to bridge the gap between those characters' exceptionalness and what makes them universal and human, so there is some level of empathy or understanding, or oh yeah, no, I feel like that. I mean, it's rare to feel like Sherlock, I'd imagine, but I think you've got to build these people as something that is recognizable and achievable as well, to make them real heroes in many ways. He says, as the actor who's about to play Doctor Strange. That's going to be tricky because he works on an astral plane, which most of us don't. But anyway,
is there someone you wouldn't play? I mean,
no, not really. I mean, well, no, that's a very good question. I don't know.
You wouldn't play anyone very stupid.
Yes, I'd love that. No, that's the point. It's like, yeah, because I am, and I talk a lot, but it would be a cakewalk.
Dumb and Dumber 3.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, less lines the better, and yeah, just completely. And who knows? There might be something I've already done that's of that ilk. But the point is, it's about variety. But those characters really sort of, they are highlights in the literal sense of that word. They kind of do stand out, and for obvious reasons, like I've described. And while the challenge is sometimes to rein them in and bring them down to earth, it's also it's so much fun to play those characters. But at the same time, it's a lot of fun to play Patrick Watts in Start of a 10, Little Charles in August Osage County, the slave-owning William Ford in 12 Years a Slave, who is crafty. I think, people say, oh yeah, you play the good slave owner. There is no such fucking thing as a good slave owner. And especially with him, I think he's morally the most corrupt. He's preaching the word of God and practicing very little of it, and selling someone he knows to be better, and therefore probably a free man, because that was a practice at the time, of really even
so you play
another
villains.
level of abhorrent. No, I play heroes as too. I play questionable heroes. I mean, my point is, I try to keep
play villains.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Khan, Smaug, Sher Khan. Can't get away from the Khan. Who else have I played? Sherlock. Yeah, he goes to a pretty dark side. It's not. If anyone hasn't seen the last episode, close your ears now. But yeah, he shoots someone. That's not winning. That's committing murder.
Well, but
Sorry.
Sherlock is not really a villain. So
No,
Sherlock is like
questionable.
so popular. 10 million people in the UK watch Sherlock. There's not one show
Legally.
in the US that 10 million people. Literally, there's not one show, I think, except maybe the Super Bowl and possibly the Oscars, that 10 million people watch in the United States, where we have over 300 million people. So this show is hot. So how does it work? Because everybody knows Sherlock Holmes. You grow up reading Sherlock Holmes, and then you see this modern day Sherlock Holmes. Like, how do you make sure that you preserve kind of the sanctity of the character and yet bring this very modern twist to it? I mean, do people write to you and say, I'm horrified at what you've done?
Probably.
How do you do it?
Well, you get rung up by two amazing writers who are huge fanboys of the original, who have a very protective kind kind of parental care of the legacy of Conan Doyle's original, and have the most exotic, spiraling, challenging imaginations that can just take it a leap forwards into the 21st century. And you then, you know, that's how I first heard about it. I first heard about the idea of modernizing Sherlock, and I was like, whoa, don't mend it if it ain't broke. And then I heard who was involved in supposedly mending something that weren't broke, and they're brilliant writers. And I knew Mark from his work in League of Gentlemen. I knew Stephen for a long time before he'd written a series called Coupling, which was really big here. And my mum had been Sarah Alexander's mum in it. So,
and your parents are in. Are
they
in the
play
final
my parents?
episode?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, in the first and the third of the last series, and so you know, I knew about this much as an audience would, going, modern Sherlock. I don't think I give that a miss, you know. And yet, you know, knowing who was involved, I thought this is going to be a cracking read, at least. I read it and completely fell in love with him and their take on it. I thought this would be a wonderful thing. And I knew then, because of the nature of the role and also how well they'd done it, that it could potentially sort of split into a sort of limelight moment, as far as what I'd done until then had been, you know, tried to sort of build a career. I wouldn't say a working actor, but just, you know, just going from job to job in a sense, and building up a retinue of work and a profile, but nothing that would go like a sort of, you know, 9 o'clock Sunday night BBC drama can do. You know, I mean, witness Poldark and everything that's happening now to him. And you know, he's a friend and he's a wonderful guy. And it's like, I know exactly what he's going through. It's crazy. Not that I'm as good looking or whatever, but it's an amazing, weird, screwy, bizarre moment. And when it happened to us, you know, we were confident we were doing a good thing. But when the actual night it aired, and this could possibly get us into social media, which is obviously a huge part of Sherlock, for the first time I was sat around with Stephen at his house and Mark, and they were on their computers looking at the Twitter feed and going, oh, it's trending. And I thought, trending? What is this word, trending? Is it the clothes? You know, I had no idea what that meant. You know, I didn't understand it was a volume of excitement and kind of participation. And this immediate thing of having a live audience through social media. So it was terrifying and wonderful all in one go. You know, you usually go to the papers the next day and go, did they shit on it, or did they think it was all right, or think it was, oh, what a horrible croaky laugh that was, sorry. or did they think, well, yeah, probably worth tuning in for next week, see how it goes. And immediately you had this volume of fandom going, yeah, you know, mainly just, this is crazy good, which was wonderful. But it meant that I was sort of stepping out into the night, getting my train home or bus or whatever it was, and just expecting, you know, journalists to sort of be abseiling out of helicopters and, you know, flashbulbs to sort of jump out of bushes. I thought, you know, and it sort of happened virtually, my fame, in a way, you know. I did the work, it was in the can, it went on telly, and then it went, what? Like that.
So actually that brings
like
up
that.
social media, because you're not a big fan of social media. You
I
don't
don't go
have
that
an
far.
active Twitter account. I think we have
No, I think it's important to state the difference here. It's not that I'm not a fan of it. It's that
well, you're not a fan of having your own
don't
social
need
media
to be
account.
a fan of it.
But you apparently love
it
photo
happens without
bombing.
me, you see. Yeah, but that wasn't me thinking, what can I do as far as social media goes in this particular moment?
But you have a huge Twitter account that is not operated by you.
I have a Twitter account?
Well, people are
This happens a lot.
The group that shall remain nameless has a Twitter account on your behalf, and they write quite a lot about you. So
do they? What do they
do.
write? Let's see a bit. Which is what, the one on the right-hand corner?
The
Benedict's on a plane.
The Cumberbees.
Benedict's brushing his teeth. Well, this is the thing that happens. So, you know, the weird thing about fame now is you walk out into any social context that's not utterly in your control, which is basically life, and everyone is a walking publisher. So you get somebody who you know is just sort of walking by, and there are lots of tactics. I just want to show you a few of the ones you might have already used, but use them again by all means if you don't already. This is the walking shot. This is like, I'm not really taking a photograph of you. You're me. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's great. There's that. Then there's the other one, which is sort of like, just doing some texting. I just think I need to text whilst looking at the horizon. And then there's the one which is just like, just having a little stretch, just waving my arm around. And then what you really mustn't do here, when you've done that, is do that and just sort of think you've got away with it. You have a screen on your phone and you haven't closed the app. You can see a picture of me going. So, I mean, so that, and the thing is, that then all gets fed back into social media because someone puts it on Flickr or Facebook or Twitter, and then it just goes, and someone out there is going, oh, great, I can paste together a piece of shit for the Daily Mail with this, and that happens a lot. Or it goes on the internet to, you know, just some website I've never heard of under my name, you know, with everything from my blood type to what colour socks I'm wearing today. Red and black, in case you're far away.
Yeah, I mean, it's modern-day paparazzi.
And
there
the
are
thing
good
is, you
things,
have to,
too.
the great things. But
Good things can happen.
But yeah, which is why I wouldn't say I'm not a fan of it.
But not when it's intrusive in your personal life.
But that's under the control of things that are outside of your control. You can't blame social media as a construct or an idea or an ideal even for that. Mm-hmm. You know, that's saying that, yeah, it's like other ideals. It's all about the human interaction with those ideals. And I think we're all still evolving and understanding both of usage and consumption. It's still very new, you know, it really is. And it relatively, you know, in terms of communication, is new and changing very quickly all the time. Whether it's Snapchat or anything new, it's just always adapting. And you could be left behind and be a generation out if you're 5 years outside of a particular trend, let alone a generation or two. And I think, you know, what fascinates me is the kind of dichotomy between connectivity and universality, this idea that we create immediacy and community with communication. And then at the same time, in doing that, very often, there is a filter involved which separates you, that you actually then, it's a complete ironic barrier between you and the thing that you're communicating about or with. Mm-hmm. You're in front of a screen, not a person. You're in front of, you know, any kind of portal that is the link between the two of you, or millions of you, or however large the group of communicators is. And, you know, it's great. You know, we'll be in driverless cars soon, so we won't even know where we're going. We won't need to know. We'll be able to be on our tablet looking at something else, and then we just arrived. It'll be a sort of slower version of teletransportation. We just don't know. We're kind of not reassembled, but we're celled, moving, arrive, and then we're out. And, you know, I just worry about the trade of bumper stickers, for example. I mean, what's going to happen to that industry? You know? Troubling times for people who've got things like "Baby, I'm bored" on the back of their car. But in all seriousness, you know, I think it's a fascinating thing, and I wouldn't say I'm not a fan. I'm intrigued by it. Personally, as a user, I haven't engaged with it, and that is to do with time. As any one of my questions your questions being answered by me has proven, I would be shit at it. How can you, I can't, you know, and fans get a great kick out of me trying to condense anything I ever say in 240 characters. It's just impossible. You know, I'm not good at it. And beyond that, it's time, and it's not that I'm just anti it and all about the slow movement. Like I say, there are great benefits, and it goes beyond just chat. You know, it's a great social tool for everything from information that's needed for emergencies to, you know, sharing recipe tips. I mean, it really does run the panoply of what...
Bringing down governments.
Social revolutions.
That's one of the good things.
Yeah, exactly. There's one.
So, can I shift gears just for a sec? We're totally out of time, but we'll go... How about if we go just a few more minutes? Does that sound good?
I'm not afraid.
Okay. Yeah. So this conference is about using data to measure the effectiveness of your brand, okay? Yep. So, and, you know, the success of your brand.
I'm sitting here saying, I don't bother.
Yeah.
That's terrible. I get other people to do it for me.
For
That's
you,
really
so how do you
measure...
For you, how do you measure your own success?
By how many Weetabix I eat in the morning. Honestly, I don't. This is the weird thing. Somebody actually told me, which I think does make relevance to me.
I mean, you get nominated for a lot of awards. You have people
but
standing in line to see you.
So, but in terms of what you're talking about, somebody sent me a text or somehow got the information to me in my sort of hermetically sealed way of look, you've come out on some poll as being one of the most highly valued commodities in the digital media. And, you know, that's, to me it's much more, like you said, it is a more human thing. That doesn't mean anything to me. And I don't know what to do about being up there with the Pope. I don't know, I know only what I can do in my life for my work, which is great. And if it means that I take an audience to stories that I want to tell or roles that I want to play, that's fantastic. It doesn't always happen, actually, but that's great. And beyond that, you know, I'm talking about usage, aren't I, rather than an awareness. But I can, if there's something I'm interested in, whether it's a charity or a project, it's great to be able to bring an attention to that. It really is important to me to be able to do that. But I don't think I really have an awareness of it until I'm in the sort of physical reality of it, which means, you know, stepping out of a hotel room in China and everyone sort of recognizing me. And that's when you go, wow, I really, you know, people told me the show was big here. It's huge, you know, it's really strange. And
so
then
the work.
It's a human thing for me
and
more than anything else. And because I'm not on social media, I'm not monitoring it. And just to go back to that very briefly. No, but
it has nothing to do with social media. It's,
no, but I'd like to go back to that, if that's all right. But I'm just
success.
talking about the idea of like how I, you know, not view it, but, oh, damn it. I forgot my train of thought.
That's all right. Let me ask you another question. Yeah, let me ask you another question. So I just wanted to talk about Julian Assange.
Yes.
So I read that you said it was the most challenging role that you've played because he's kind of a notorious guy.
Yeah.
And I have a clip I want to show in a second. Yes. So some people have said that even you, the incredibly likable you, couldn't make Julian Assange likable. So let me show you guys a clip.
Oh, maybe I failed.
It's critical. Julian Assange is not a likable man. Even Benedict Cumberbatch could not make him likable. He's uncumberbatchable. That was supposed to be physically impossible.
So that's John Oliver, who's English, but apparently more popular in the United States than in England. But just in case you don't know who it is.
I think he's very popular here as well, but he's more known.
So why was that your most challenging role?
Uncumberbatchable. I love being turned into a bird.
Isn't that the best?
So much fun.
Uncumberbatchable.
Or is that an adjective? Who knows? Discuss. Fucking hell, poor Julian Assange. I mean, you know, I don't. This is a bear trap if ever there was one. I mean, what do I say? Yeah, you know, even otters can be made to be conclusive. What?
I've stumped you.
A little, yeah, because I hate the idea that I can crucify anything. I like presenting warts and all for a start. I don't shy away from complexity. He's being flippant. He's being funny, and it is very funny. But if there is a serious point to be made, and particularly about Julian, is that, you know, it was a very personal take on an incredibly personalized political moment in history, really. An incredibly important character. This isn't just me tub-thumping for him, but, you know, people out there will have their judgments, but also know what the validity is of the idea of having an anonymous whistleblowing algorithm to publicize wrongdoing, to keep the rule of law in check, to keep the balances of power in check. It's a revolutionary idea, and it's about technology, so it's worthwhile acknowledging the achievement of that. And then everything else that film is about is debatable. It's a perspective. We never shied away from saying this is based on a certain perspective. He never shied away from saying it's a poisonous, one-sided, abhorrent perspective. And discuss, go and see other perspectives, read his, you know, engage with the arguments, and most importantly, his work and what that organization achieves and still achieves and has achieved. So yeah, fuck whether I make him likable or not, who cares, you know? He's got his fans where they matter, and, you know, I mean, on a serious note, it does not matter. It's not a, you know, popularity contest.
No?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, you don't go into this thinking, right, well, I've got to make everyone like me. And just to go back, this is my point, social media, you know, there are moments when the narrative of perception, as far as brand or anything you want to call it, just what people think or understand or know about me, is utterly out of my control. So a newspaper has the legal right to write an article that can be a cut and paste job, literally a cut and paste job, from all the worst moments or slightly awkward or misinterpreted or potential negative thing about me, and blam, there's a profile, and you walk away going, what a fucking arsehole. I want to see him skewered on a stick and paddle batted through Soho naked whilst being, you know, all of his bank account drained and thrown at any problem in the world, and then his family being humiliated for the rest of their lives. I mean, it creates huge amounts of hate, or justified hate, about that tall poppy syndrome of build them up to take him down, which, you know, I knew was always going to be a part of whatever stepping into Sherlock land might behold. For all its goodness, there's a weirdness to that, you know. You take a breath and go, A, I can't control this. B, I can't make everyone like me, and you'd be a madman to try. And you wouldn't be any good at your job, I don't think, or be true to yourself, or what really matters in life, if you did. And I make no apology for that. And that's where the lure of social media has often raised its head. And I've gone, oh, I want to get involved in this one. I really want to punch this dickhead back. I really want to get out there and put the record straight. I am not spoon-fed by, I'm not going to go into them all now. I'm so tempted to. The myths out there about me, but in a way, that's the Trojan horse. That's what people want, because then the cycle can continue.
So let me ask
that goes for a lot of things. So again, that's another sort of measure of success, is how much you can sort of step away from success.
Let me ask you about a last character, David Bowie. So I heard you want to play David Bowie, and I would love to see you play David Bowie. Do we have a picture of what that might look like?
Oh, do we?
So,
there you go.
So there are rumors that you might actually get a chance to play David Bowie. So one, can you confirm that rumor? And two, why David Bowie?
No comment.
No comment.
Sorry.
That's lame.
Like I said, I'm not.
That is very
I don't
lame.
give a fuck about being liked by everyone.
I'm
so
disappointed.
No yeah, lots of words.
Data.
Pardon?
Data.
Oh, data.
Data.
Well, you said data, which I've never. Data. Hello. I have a data stick.
Data. Oh, I like data much
so I should say when I say goodbye to you today. Data. Data. Information. I guess. Yeah.
Cumberbatch.
Me.
Okay. Give him a hand.
Thanks, guys. That was great fun. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.